So what is going on, guys? Welcome back to On The Shelf. As you know already from this channel, I am Shuzo Oshimi's biggest fan. I love all of his works. So I went out kind of looking for some new things to kind of fill the void in between the regular Inside Mari releases and the Blood on the Tracks physical releases as well. And I discovered one of his older series that is only available digitally. So of course we're talking about Drifting Net Café. Now this one, I definitely have a lot to say about this, and it's not all good, which was quite surprising for me. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit like, and if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. So yeah, let's get straight to it. So Shuzo Oshimi is an author that you might know is kind of known for really controversial themes and topics in his manga. He does a lot of things to make you feel uncomfortable, but they usually have a point. They're kind of all aimed at the way in which the human mind works, the way in which society kind of interacts, and they all have this sort of moral kind of point to them. There's a few series that he's done that have these like supernatural elements to them. So you've got Happiness, which is all revolving around vampires, and then you have Inside Mari, which is like a body swap manga. But Drifting Net Café is a supernatural based manga, but more around human interaction as opposed to anything else. It's a bit more of a kind of drama that it has a bit of a supernatural setting to it. So to elaborate, it revolves around a middle-aged man who's kind of gone through life doing everything that he felt he was supposed to do. You know, he got married at a certain age, he got an office job that he kind of fell into, and he's about to have a baby. And he sort of fondly remembers his sort of first love at school, his childhood crush, and as we all do, we kind of revisit those memories and sometimes wonder, you know, what would have happened, what would be different if I'd done this differently, etc. So for some reason on his way home, he feels compelled to stop at this net cafe, which kind of does show the age of the manga. So it's not in an age where everyone kind of had a computer. At one point, people would have to, if you couldn't afford one, you could go to an internet cafe and pay for however many hours to use their computers. And they're all kind of set up in these office blocks, and people would just sit next to one another and, you know, do whatever they wanted to do, play video games, do a bit of work, you know, whatever sort of took their fancy. So our main character, for some reason, feels like he doesn't want to go home just yet. He's had a big argument with his wife, and he thinks that, you know, he kind of can't face that right now. So he's never been to an internet cafe, and he just sees one on his way home, and he decides to go in. Now, while he's in there, he soon realizes that his childhood crush is actually there as well. And he bumps into her, and they start kind of talking about the past and how things have changed. And then before you know it, something happens. All the internet goes down, and the characters then realize that they're actually trapped inside this net cafe. There's a big flood outside, you know, it's raining, it's dark, and people don't think that it's safe to go home. So they all decide to stay there overnight, wait it out until the morning, and our main character's freaking out. He doesn't know what his wife is gonna think. She's gonna be, you know, stressed out to hell because she's pregnant. And of course, he feels guilty for spending time with this girl that he still has feelings for. Then things get really weird. So the characters, I don't think that this counts as a spoiler because it's initial setup, and I'm not really gonna kind of dive too much into this video about the ins and outs of all the characters and everything that happens. It's definitely something you should experience for yourself to make your own mind up. But yeah, the story takes a weird turn where the characters realize that they're no longer in Japan. The net cafe has somehow kind of traveled to this other land, this other place, and as I said, this has a very supernatural setting. They don't know where they are, it doesn't look like anywhere, and there's no one else or no other buildings in sight. It looks like a really weird, strange land, and no one can really figure out how they got there. So this then falls into kind of a survival story, almost. It becomes a bit of like a lost scenario, like what would you do if you were on a desert island and how would you survive? And it becomes a bit like the story Lord of the Flies, where people start, you know, fighting amongst each other and picking sides and choosing enemies. And it's where Shuzo Oshimi really chooses to explore the human kind of mind, the way, you know, different people would react in those situations, and of course some of those reactions aren't good. Again, yeah, without spoiling anything, there's a lot of serious themes in this manga. There's a whole lot of sexual assault and rape, there's murder, you know, there's everything sort of negative in the human kind of environment that you can imagine within this manga. And initially when I read this, I thought that it has a good reason to do so. You know, when put in that situation, some people are going to choose to run away or go inside themselves and kind of keep away from everyone else, and other people will thrive off that energy and choose to abuse their sort of positions and get what they can from you and try and manipulate the situation. And it does become that way. A few characters decide that they're going to be the kind of leader of the group, and they tend to abuse things in more ways than one. As someone who's familiar with Oshimi's work, I think he does always choose very controversial topics. You know, Flowers of Evil is all about kind of puberty, but also being a little bit perverted and kind of accepting that. And then you have like Inside Mari, which is like a body swap, which has a lot of kind of controversial situations involved with that. And then his newest work, Blood on the Tracks, is one that has been heavily discussed online because of kind of its disturbing nature. So I went in reading, you know, into reading Drifting Net Café, thinking that I was so familiar with what he could do within a story, and then this one really, you know, just came out of nowhere and really slapped me across the face and told me that I didn't know shit. At its core basis, it's a manga about letting go of your first love and coming to terms with the way in which your life has kind of played out, and you know, that journey that everyone goes through where they look back at their lives and think about what they might have changed, and then accepting things for the way they are. But then also, like I said, it is a human study about how everyone might react differently when put under pressure and put in a life or death situation. For the most part, it does it really well. It was a really compelling read, and it's very short. I think it's only 7 volumes long, and I read them all within a day. Like all of Oshimi's manga, it's very easy to kind of fly straight through it. But I did find by about the 3rd or 4th volume that there was a lot of recurring things that happen. So, you know, rape within a story I always find obviously disturbing, but if it has a purpose, then I don't tend to shy away from reading it. I always think there's a reason for this, you know, this is the way in which some people have behaved, and although it's, you know, horrible and no one should ever do that, I think it does happen, so we can't ignore that within storytelling. But the amount of it in this story just becomes insane. It's just so much, and I think it didn't ever lose its shock value, but I started to question why it existed within this story. One of the characters does so many horrible things that I think, you know, it's already sort of done what it was trying to do. It's already displayed the depravity of humanity. But to the extent that this story goes, I really struggled to enjoy reading it. Another kind of negative that I had was there's this whole world that they kind of arrive in, and no one really knows where they are or why they're there, and that isn't really explored very much. I think Oshimi wanted to focus more on the main character and how he was feeling about his childhood sort of fling at school and everything that went along with that, as opposed to the outside world, but I would have liked a little bit more exploration. I think the characters didn't really do what I would have done in that situation. You know, you always kind of compare how you would behave in Lost, or I would go looking for water or shelter or whatever, and it's like they all just decide to stay in the cafe for the majority of the story, which was obviously an artistic choice to focus on the character developments and everything, but I would be searching for people. I would be looking to kind of find out where they are, or, you know, what was happening, and no one really seems to care. I think they all just suddenly become wrapped up in their own stuff. And yeah, just a whole lot of messed up stuff happens in the later volumes, and it becomes less about survival and more just about kind of doing horrible things for the sake of it. Finally, I think that this story had a really kind of disappointing ending. In the way that I spoke about Happiness before, and that I really loved the whole story and then it just fell flat and I kind of wanted more of it, This sort of does the opposite. It felt like it went on to the point where I was like, okay, like you can stop being so horrible now, everyone can just chill, and then it just ends. It wraps itself up in a few chapters, and I was like, oh, thank God, you know, thank God it just ended. But the ending didn't really satisfy me either. I didn't come away feeling anything other than kind of a little bit shell-shocked, and this was really tough to kind of make this video and say negative things about Oshimi, because I love him, I love all of his works that I've read, but this one for me really missed the mark, I would say. That's not to say that there aren't kind of good things about this series. I think that you should read it for the discussion of it, and I think there's definitely things in it that you can see about his storytelling and how he kind of adapted that into his later works. So if you're a huge Oshimi fan, I still recommend reading it just to kind of get a feel for his earlier works and stuff. It's the same with Asano, you know, some of his earlier stories just don't hit those emotional marks that his later ones do, but I still love them and look back on them fondly for, you know, a variety of reasons, but mostly because they allow me to see how he developed as an artist and as a storyteller. And I do like Drifting Net Café for that reason, but there's so many negatives about the subject matter and the content of this story that I probably won't be reading it again for a very long time. So yeah, as I said, this isn't one that I can recommend for everyone, just people who are really into Shuzo Oshimi and are really interested about his earlier works. But of course, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed my thoughts on Drifting Net Cafe, then please leave a like. Let me know down below in the comments if you've read this series before and what your thoughts on it were. Do you think it was too kind of explicit in parts? But yeah, thank you again for watching, and thank you for everything you do for this channel. Please stay tuned for lots more videos. You know, hit subscribe and hit that bell to get notified when all my videos go live. And of course, stay awesome. Peace.